The knock came late, sharp enough to cut through the quiet night and strong enough to change everything Ethan Parker believed about moving on. Ethan had just turned off the living room lamp when he heard it. Outside, rain poured hard onto the sidewalks of his small Oregon town, the kind of rain Americans knew well, steady, cold, and impossible to ignore. He almost didn't answer. No one visited this late. No one ever did. But something in the knock felt uncertain, like hesitation, wrapped in urgency. When he opened the door, time broke. Claire Morgan stood there, drenched from head to toe, holding a small overnight bag like it was the last thing keeping her steady. Her hair was darker now, shorter than he remembered, but her eyes were the same deep, expressive, carrying too many unspoken stories. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the silence. "Ethan," she said softly, as if saying his name might test whether he was real. He couldn't move. 8 years vanished and returned in a single second. She was the woman who had left without warning, without goodbye, without explanation. The woman he had loved when he was younger and believed love was enough. "Sorry," Claire said. "I know it's late. I didn't know where else to go." That was all it took. No speech. No apology long enough to explain the past. Ethan stepped aside, letting her in, even though every memory in his body warned him what this could do. The house felt too quiet once the door closed. Rain dripped from Claire's jacket onto the wooden floor. Ethan handed her a towel, his hands slightly shaking. He noticed small details, the tired lines on her face, the way she avoided his eyes, the nervous way she held the towel like a shield. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. Words felt dangerous. Claire sat on the couch, her overnight bag at her feet. Ethan stayed standing, unsure where to put himself. The last time they had been in the same room, they were both different people. Younger, certain. Now everything felt fragile. "I didn't plan this," Claire said quickly, as if afraid silence would push her out the door. "My hotel reservation got messed up, and this town was closer than I thought." Ethan didn't ask why she was in town. Not yet. He went to the kitchen and put water on to boil, needing something to do with his hands. He made tea the way he always did when he couldn't sleep. When he returned, Claire was staring at the bookshelf, at old photos he hadn't bothered to take down. She smiled faintly. "You still keep everything?" "Some things," he said. They sat across from each other, tea steaming between them. The conversation started carefully, like walking on thin ice. Work, travel, weather. Claire mentioned Seattle. Ethan mentioned teaching. They spoke fast, filling the space, afraid of slowing down. But memories slipped through anyway. She laughed once, softly, at something he said, and it hit him harder than he expected. He remembered that laugh. It had once been the sound that made his worst days bearable. "I didn't think you'd open." "The door," Claire admitted. "I almost didn't," Ethan said honestly. She looked down. That would have made sense. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. Midnight crept closer. Outside, the rain softened. Ethan finally asked the question that had burned in him since she arrived. "Why now?" Claire took a deep breath. "I came back for work. There's an office opening here. But when I drove past your street, I don't know." Stopped. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied herself. "I needed a familiar face." Ethan felt the old pull, the dangerous one. He reminded himself that people didn't disappear for 8 years and return unchanged. Neither did feelings. "I can set up the guest room," he said, standing quickly. Claire hesitated. "You sure?" "Yes." The guest room was simple, clean, quiet. He handed her a blanket and an old sweater when he noticed her shiver. "You can lock the door," he said too quickly. She smiled gently. "I trust you." That trust felt heavier than anger. They stood awkwardly in the hallway, neither wanting to be the first to retreat. Finally, Claire spoke. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." When he closed his bedroom door, sleep refused to come. His mind raced with questions he didn't ask and answers he wasn't ready to hear. Down the hall, Claire lay awake too, staring at the ceiling, wondering if showing up had been a mistake or the bravest thing she had done in years. The house held both of them, filled with old echoes and new tension. By the time the rain stopped, nothing felt the same anymore. The smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen before the sun fully rose, and Ethan knew right then that the morning would decide everything the night had stirred awake. He stood at the counter staring at the coffee maker like it might tell him what to do next. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the streets clean and quiet. Early lights spilled across the backyard, calm and honest, the kind of morning that didn't hide anything. Ethan hadn't slept much. His thoughts had raced too fast, pulling him back through years he had carefully packed away. Then he heard the soft sound of footsteps. Claire appeared at the doorway, pausing as if unsure whether she belonged there. She wore the old gray sweater Ethan had handed her the night before. It was too big, sleeves covering part of her hands, and seeing her in it hit him harder than he expected. She looked calmer than she had the night before, but there was tension in her eyes, like she was bracing for impact. "Morning," she said. "Morning," Ethan replied. They stood there for a second too long, both aware that this was no longer about shelter from the rain. This was about unfinished truth. Claire moved first, stepping into the kitchen. "I can help," she said, reaching for a mug. Ethan shook his head. "It's fine." They sat at the small wooden table, steam rising. Between them, the silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy, full of meaning, like both of them were waiting for the other to blink. "I almost left before you woke up," Claire said suddenly. "I thought maybe it would be easier." Ethan looked up. "Would it?" She gave a small, sad smile for a moment, but not really. He nodded. That honesty mattered. Claire wrapped her hands around the mug, warming them. "I owe you more than an apology." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You don't owe me anything." "That's not true," she said firmly. "I disappeared. I broke your trust. Didn't even give you a reason." The words landed quietly, but they landed deep. Ethan stared at the table, then back at her. "I spent a long time trying to guess the reason." "I know," Claire said. "And I hate that." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I left because I was scared of staying. Everything was moving fast. You were sure. I wasn't. And instead of saying that, I ran." Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. "Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. You could have told me," he said. "I was afraid if I stayed, I'd disappoint you," she replied. "And if I left, I only disappointed myself." They sat quietly, the truth settling between them. Outside, a car passed by, distant and unaware of the moment happening inside that small kitchen. "I came back for a job interview," Claire continued. "But seeing you last night made me realize that wasn't the only reason I returned." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What was the other reason?" She met his eyes. "I never stopped wondering what our life would have been if I'd stayed." The words were simple, but they carried years of weight. Ethan stood and walked to the window. He needed movement, space. The past had a way of rushing in when he stayed still. "I tried to forget you," he said quietly. "I told myself it didn't matter anymore." "Did it work?" Claire asked. He shook his head. "Not really." That was the truth neither of them could avoid. Claire stood too, stepping closer but not touching him. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I just didn't want to leave again without saying the things I should have said before." Ethan turned to face her, for the first time since she arrived. He looked at her fully, not as the woman who left, but as the person standing in front of him now, older, wiser, still familiar. "I built a life here," he said. "It's quiet, stable. I learned how to be okay." "I'm glad," Claire said softly. "You deserve that." He believed her. They talked for a long time after that. Not about the past alone, but about who they had become. the mistakes, the lessons. The loneliness that followed, them both in different cities. There was no rush, no pressure, just honesty. Eventually, Claire checked her phone and sighed. I should go. I don't want to turn this into something confusing. Ethan walked her to the door. The morning sun was higher now, bright and clear. She paused on the porch. Thank you for letting me stay, she said. It meant more than you know. He nodded. I'm glad you knocked. They stood there, a moment stretching thin, filled with possibility and caution. I don't know where I'll end up, Claire said, but I'm glad I saw you. So am I, Ethan replied. She smiled, genuine this time, and stepped down the porch steps. As she walked toward her car, Ethan felt a strange mix of relief and hope. Not because everything was solved, but because nothing was being avoided anymore. Claire drove away slowly, disappearing down the street. Ethan stayed on the porch long after she was gone, breathing in the quiet morning air. The house behind him felt different now, lighter. Sometimes he realized what happens in the morning isn't about answers, it's about truth. And sometimes that's enough to begin again.